Good afternoon, and welcome to the Voice of Wisdom. With over 60 years of experience as an investment banker, entrepreneur, investment analyst, economist, and venture capitalist, Morty Davis is Wall Street and capitalism personified. The over 400 companies for which he has raised more than $3 billion over the years have created a countless number of jobs and exciting new products. Through the Voice of Wisdom, Mr. Davis explores, analyzes, and debates the most topical political, economic, and social issues facing our world today. Joining Mr. Davis today for a discussion on our national priorities is Brett Kingstone. Mr. Kingstone is a high-tech entrepreneur, award-winning real estate developer, brilliant inventor, author, and generous philanthropist. And now, Mr. Davis and Mr. Kingstone.
Welcome back.
Thank you,
It's
Morty.
great to be with you.
Great to see you again.
This young man, Brett Kingstone, is my hero because he epitomizes all of the kind of entrepreneurs that I backed and built companies, jobs, new industries. He's a genius, and I watched him grow. When he came into my office initially, I don't know if he was bar mitzvah yet. I don't know if he was even if he was even more than 13.
25 years ago, Morty.
I loved that he had this drive, this energy, this creativity, that he was describing what he planned to do, and he did it all and more. So it's a pleasure for me, and should be for you, to have him on board. He's also somewhat feisty, so he's the kind of guy that makes a good show.
You could tell him, Morty, Meshuggah, okay?
Yeah.
You could be honest, all right? We've known each other 25 years. The only question I have, I was talking to Leonard earlier, is how the heck have you tolerated me for so many years, Morty? What's your secret? How are you able to tolerate
me? Even when you disagree with me, you make a good case. You know, you're clever, you're witty, and you base it on facts, not just on your
opinion. Yeah,
preconceived or arrived at opinions. Yeah. So, you know, unlike some of the people out there that create their own facts.
Yep.
You know, they're entitled to their own opinions, but not to their own facts.
They're called narratives, but Morty. They have narratives, not facts. Yeah, and they're totally created, self-created, not based on anything in the real world.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
So you're a genius that I appreciate having on the show, even though you might aggravate me, but that's part of the process. Anyway, if you agreed with me, it would be a boring show. So I like having you on because you raise my
blood pressure,
temperature, my blood. I need that like a hole in the head. Anyway, today we were discussing an interesting subject, maybe a little early, because both Trump and Biden have now declared that they'll be running for the presidency come a little less than 2 years from now. And it's not inappropriate as we get closer, but even now, to think about what each one of them represents, what each one promises to do or plans to do, or we can count on to do, based on their past record and their ideologies. So let's get started and talk about, I know you have strong views about what the Republicans stand for and what they, not only Republicans, but even the ones that were Republicans, or somebody like Trump who's developed his own ideology. Because when he was like a great friend of mine years ago, he was diametrically different than what he is today. He was
He was a
pro-choice.
Democrat back then. Yeah.
He was pro-choice.
Correct.
I didn't like him because he was a Democrat. I just liked his ideas. I vote both ways. I'm eclectic. I voted for um, Ronald Reagan. I voted for Bush. Well, I was very good friends with Bush the father, and and I voted for Bill Clinton, who I liked a lot. So I went. I vote for the person and his ideas, not for the party.
Amen.
But when I was friendly with Trump years ago, he was very diametrically opposite of what he is today. He was pro-choice. He was for many of the things that he supported Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton both, and some of their ideas about helping the vulnerable and the people at the lowest end of the economic ladder. And although, I admired Clinton because even though he was supportive of the safety net, he was the one guy that eliminated welfare as it was at that time. He said, you got to get a job. You got to prove that you're entitled to it. You can't just live off the phony claims. So even though he was a Democrat, he got it done. It's always like
Clinton
that.
was a good president. I admit to that, and I don't care about any of the personal issues related to Bill Clinton. I only care about how he governed, and I agree with you. He did a lot of things that would seem irrational to the current Democratic Party today.
Yeah, in the South American countries and in many countries throughout the world, one of the bonuses or the perks of becoming president is you can have as many mistresses as you want and so forth. They don't care about the guy's sexual inclinations or his behavior with as long as they're not abusive. Some of them are abusive even. But I was not judgmental with respect to Clinton's behavior. I don't. I think
All I cared is how he ran the country, Morty. That's all I cared about. How he ran the country.
Taking advantage of one young intern doesn't make him a hero in my book, and then is very susceptible to reasonable criticism. But he did a good job, and miraculously, he was the one president in the last 200 years, maybe, that created a surplus.
Yep, created a surplus. Yes,
Yep.
absolutely right.
It's unheard of.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
If he lost a lot of money and he was like a saint, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't win him any praise from my side of it. Let me tell you.
No, he ran a good economy too. I mean, the economy was good. Everything was good. Not everything. Everything is never good. I mean,
most things that matter. Most things that matter. Agreed.
Yeah. And the economy was definitely good.
Yeah.
But Bill Clinton's not running, I don't think, unless you heard otherwise.
But Kennedy is. But Kennedy is. He's another name you need to insert into the discussion, because I very much appreciate what Kennedy recently said when he said he thought it was a bad idea that Fox News fired Tucker Carlson because it's a negative impact on freedom of speech. And coming from a Democrat, I thought that was an incredible, very open-minded thing to say, and also something that shows that he's considering all issues and not following any one party line. And what we need is leaders that were able to separate themselves from the party line and do what's best for the American people. And I was very impressed with Kennedy. Yeah. Very impressed with what he had to say.
And Tucker Carlson, whatever you say about him, and there's a lot to say about him, negatively, he was a great entertainer. He was really, he didn't hold back. He said whatever he felt like, regardless of whether it was supported or not, true or not.
But the young Kennedy now that's running is actually running for president. He threw his hat in the ring, And I think if the Democrats allow to have an open debate, he may take a very big percentage of the Democratic vote. Because the last survey by CNNBC and CNN shows the vast majority of Democratic voters do not want Biden to run again. And that you've probably seen the polls.
Yes, 64% of the country does not endorse or support Biden's running.
Yeah.
So
the last poll I saw was up to 73%, but with Democrats, it's 57 to 58% of the Democratic voters. And from voters under 30, it's closer to 85 to 90%. Young people just don't want someone like that to be running. And, quite frankly, the question here is, who are you for, Trump or Biden? Well, I can tell you that it could be open to debate, Morty, whether or not, as Republicans, we want Trump to run for president. But nobody debates the fact that he's capable of being president. As it relates to Biden, Biden should be in a nursing home, not the White House. He's completely incapable of leading, and clearly he's investigative to crime.
I don't agree with that.
Well, I had to get started making trouble sometime, Morty, so I guess this is it, huh?
Biden may not demonstrate that he's the most articulate guy or that he's always on, as he got older, some of that runs into your speech.
Shaking hands with people after a speech that don't exist, that are not even on the platform. And President Macron had to help him up the platform so he know which way to enter. He doesn't know where to exit. He doesn't know where to enter. He shakes hands with imaginary people. And half the time he loses his train of thought. How can you allow someone like that to run the most powerful nation on earth? I can tell you right now, I solely believe the reason why Putin invaded Ukraine is he knew Biden was weak, he could steamroll Ukraine, and he would meet with little to no opposition. I could tell you the one good thing that he could say that he possibly did was motivate the Europeans to play some role in assisting Ukraine militarily. But when you have weak presidents, you open yourself to very dire circumstances with your opponents and your enemies. And Putin, I think, walked right in because he thought Biden was.
Well, again, we start to disagree because I feel that we should have negotiated with Putin before he.
Oh, I agree with you
took
100%. But Biden didn't have that capacity.
Because he made one proposal that we should have, ever since Chamberlain and Hitler was criticized because he gave up Czechoslovakia and I forget what other lands. What did they call it? The Westerland or something. He gave land. He gave it to Hitler and he came back to England and he said, well, now we got it settled.
And we'll have peace
There'll
in
be
our
peace
time.
forever.
That was his exact words. We'll have peace in our time. And boy, was he wrong. Okay? What I'm saying to you, Morty, is I have...
Let me finish that thought. Because, he was very devastated. He lost and he died not long after that because he was so depressed about being so wrong. But it didn't change anything. Hitler would have done the same thing either way. But at least he made a try. Putin said, if you keep Ukraine out of the NATO, I won't attack Ukraine.
Can I say something now, Morty?
Now,
okay,
wait a second. It's worth a try. Yes. It's worth a try. And you tell them, okay, we're going to crack out because we certainly didn't need Ukraine. We have 20 major nations as part of NATO. Ukraine is not going to enhance NATO in any way. I can understand why Ukraine would want to be part of it because the United States promises that if any of those countries ever get attacked, the United States will step in. So we overreach anyway. But if you think about it, the United States, with a strong defense, and it's the best country in the world by far. It's the best economic system by far, with all its problems and all its inequality and imperfections. It's still the best in the history of the human race. but we become
But it's not going to stay
overly
that way,
aggressive.
Morty, forever if we keep running up these terrible deficits and these huge national debt. We're going to go the way of Rome, where Rome completely burned from its own inequities and its own terrible policies and programs. And that's what's happening now in the United States. Our national debt is at an obscene level. It's almost completely unsustainable, as well as these deficits. Running up this budget and constantly increasing our national debt, we're in a path to bankruptcy.
I promise you that won't lead to the end of this country. As long as we can print our own currency, we'll never go bankrupt.
And our currency will be worth like the German Deutschmark was in the Weimar Republic, where they were wallpapering their bathrooms with it and using wheelbarrow loads to buy a loaf of bread. Is that really what you want for our future?
Look, after the Second World War, we had the same ratio, roughly, that we have now vis-a-vis the gross national product. The debt was equal to over 100% at that time.
War, it was the highest it ever was in history. We're now back there again. It's terrible, Morty.
No, but it's not taken care of. We never went under. We never, because you know what? It always is like that. The debt is nominal in terms, and then you have inflation, and you're paying it off. Anybody like the Chinese buy our
They're
bonds?
Not buying our bonds
by
anymore,
the time
Morty. They're using their yuan as their own currency, the world currency. They're negotiating now with India, Brazil, and Russia to make yuan the standard world currency. They're going to take over the dollar.
Brett, they still own more bonds than any other country in the world. Years ago it was Japan, now it's China.
And that's changing
now. By the time we pay them off, it'll be worth in real buying power. We'll pay off exactly $1,000 a bond, as we promised. But it'll be worth like $300. That's why it's easy to pay it off.
Isn't it a shame that we've created so much debt? We need the Chinese to help us to prop up our currency. Wouldn't you rather have a self-sufficient, strong, independent America that doesn't have to rely on China to manufacture products, to buy up our debt? Why don't we stop making it? That's what we should be doing.
I agree with you.
Biden's spending money like a drunken sailor on steroids right now.
Well, you and I disagree.
Obscene.
Well, you and I disagree enormously. As I feel, the debt is run up by virtue of the fact that we spend all that money on defense. We should stop. We become so arrogant. We become so powerful in our own minds.
In unnecessary wars. That's the biggest cost of our defense budget.
As we all know,
we went into Iraq on false premises. We went into Afghanistan on false premises. We could have simply bombed bin Laden from above. We didn't have to send hundreds of thousands of our boys and girls to have their legs blown off. You know,
we agree on something because
we agree.
We had no reason to go into Afghanistan. Presumably, the reason was they killed 3,000. What's his name? Osama bin Laden killed 3,000 people on 9/11.
Bombed them into the Stone Age. We didn't have to send our troops. Okay.
No, you don't. You don't bomb the country. You go after Osama bin Laden. Ultimately, we got Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. Why attack a country that the Russians had war with before us?
Tens of thousands of their soldiers. You're right on that, Morty.
Left without. So
but Morty, we can't give up our defense budget because if you don't prepare for war, you will never have peace. You'll have tyrants like Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin invading your country if you don't have a good military. You know that.
Bull. Okay. We only defend. We've never been in all our history. We've never been attacked.
We've had a strong military, Morty. That's why.
They can't get here. We're not part of it.
ICBMs can get here in 12 minutes from China, Morty. The ICBMs
remember
get here in 12
remember,
minutes. That's how dangerous
do you remember the Monroe? Do you remember the Monroe Doctrine?
Yes, I do.
Well, what did he say?
Well, it was American isolationism. specifically, and then also he wanted to help the other countries to raise them up.
It was American wisdom. He said we should not get involved in foreign wars, only North or South America, only our home
continent,
area.
yes.
Yeah, why go all over the world? We're in Sudan, where we got troops.
It was American isolationism. That was his doctrine. And quite frankly, I agree with you on that. We shouldn't be running around and engaging in everybody else's war.
I call it intelligence. Why do we belong? Why do we have?
We agree.
We have troops since 1945. We have troops in Germany since 1945. We have troops in every country. We have NATO. What are we doing? It's an arrogance. And we lightly go into wars. Bush says we could have checked. We could have gone in and found out if they do have before you say. Yeah,
they didn't have it.
They
didn't have it. It was not only bad intel, it was bad policy. And by the way, even though I'm from a military family and I'm very strongly supportive of our military, the last thing I want to do is send my brothers and sisters into a battle overseas where they come home either in a casket or missing limbs for no good reason. I think the last 4 or 5 wars we've been involved in, totally unnecessary. Totally. And quite frankly, I do believe that we have to help countries like Ukraine stop Putin at their borders. Because if not, he'll roll into Poland, he'll roll into Moldavia, he'll roll into all the neighboring countries. He wants to reestablish the Russian Federation, wants to reestablish the Soviet Union. But this was a failure of diplomacy, Morty. If they didn't go in and, like you said before, they didn't negotiate properly, they didn't negotiate from strength, this could have been avoided. And just let me let you know when I had supervision, when you took me public, I had distributors in Russia.
Yeah.
I had distributors in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Vladimir Karpov was one of them. My son, Max, stayed at his home during the summer for a month. And his son...
At whose home?
At Vladimir's home in Moscow. My son, Max, stayed at his home in Moscow. And his son, Andrei... Karpov. He's a successful Russian businessman. He was my distributor for the company you took public, supervision. Andre stayed at my house, okay? All I can tell you is we're still friends and we still talk to each other. And the one thing that Vladimir Karpov said to me, there's only 2 things that Vladimir Putin wanted to avoid invading Ukraine. 1, to guarantee that Ukraine would not become a member of NATO for at least 5 years. And second, 2, to guarantee nuclear missiles will never be stationed at his border, because Ukraine's on his border. And what did he say to me that I thought was the smartest thing I heard from anybody, both American and Russian, is, Brett, can't you understand? Look what the United States did during the Cuban Missile Crisis. When Khrushchev and Brezhnev, they wanted to bring the missiles to Cuba, you sent out your entire fleet. You were ready to engage in nuclear war to stop us from putting missiles in Cuba. Well, guess what, Brett? Cuba is not directly on your border. It's near your border, but Ukraine is directly on our border. We see this no differently than you did during the Cuban Missile Crisis. We were willing to do anything to stop missiles being placed near our border. Why the hell didn't Biden get on a plane, meet Vladimir Putin in Geneva, and work this out? Look at the devastation to Ukraine. Look how many of their citizens destroyed. Unnecessary.
You just made the case for Putin. The minute Cuba got the missiles, we got crazy. And they're 90 miles away. Poland is on their border.
Ukraine's on their border.
I think, Hungary.
But that's not my case. That's Putin's case. And it's understanding that he wouldn't want nuclear missiles on his border any more than we wanted them in Cuba. That's what Vladimir told us.
It's our leadership that created all this. In my mind, you know what happened after the Soviet Union broke up, right? The first thing we did 2 or 3 years later? We put missiles facing Russia in Poland and in Hungary. That's some way to behave when a guy says, okay, I have no Cold War against you. I'm not doing anything. I'm breaking up my whole Soviet Union. They did everything that we wanted, and we act like they're still our enemy, and we put missiles on the border. We should have invited them at that time into NATO. Russia, we should have invited into NATO. How do you treat a guy that makes peace with you and gives you everything you want, and then treat him like an enemy?
You're right, Morty.
That was
Morty, my friend
that was
Vladimir
a
couldn't agree with you more on that subject. He said the exact same
Yes.
words to me. You're right. So again, a miracle. The Red Sea parted, the burning bushes appeared. The second time Morty and Brett have agreed.
Yeah, I think I should stop doing this show anymore because I'll never get it.
Chair, you
I'll
might
never-
get hit by lightning.
never- I'll never achieve a milestone like this. Getting Brett to agree
I
with
agree
me.
with you. You're right.
Anyway, I'm writing a book now.
I read your
and
other books.
I'm
They
talking
were
about
great,
the fact.
Morty. Your other books. What was the one about hot
And,
stocks?
and you, sup-
The one hot stocks.
and you, I'll tell you a great story. Mike Bloomberg, who applied for a job with
Wow.
me, he always tells me, Morty, you wouldn't hire me. He tells everybody, and I always tell him, you were meant for better and bigger and better things. Anyway, so he's always bringing it up to me. So when he was running for mayor, he invited me to a luncheon at the 21 Club. You been to the
No, I
21
haven't. I
Club,
heard of
have you?
it, but I've never been there. Yeah.
Still was the best restaurant, or the most elite,
Yeah.
The big shots always wanted to sit near the entrance so they'd be
Yeah.
noticed. Anyway, so he had a luncheon at the 21 Club, and he invited a lot of impressive people, important people. So I went up to him and I gave him a check for his mayoralty contest. The first and only time I ever got a check back from a politician. He said, Morty, I'm not taking any money from anybody. I'm funding this campaign all with my
Wow.
own money.
Wow.
So that was great. So then he walked me over and he sat me down at a table. I sat down next to Pete Peterson. I don't know if you
who's
ever heard
Pete?
of Pete Peterson. Pete was a former Secretary of Commerce, but more than that, he was a partner at Lehman. Him and Schwartzman were partners at Lehman. The only time I ever heard of partners being thrown out. They were thrown out of Lehman. It was like the biggest scandal
And they
on
were
Wall
lucky.
Street.
Look what happened to
Because he-
Lehman. That was the best thing ever happened to him.
I'm
Huh?
saying, not know what to wish
Yeah.
for. You're right. Lehman's,
Sure.
and they're the biggest in the
Sure.
world. They used to take out over $1 billion a year, and they have much more than that
BlackRock,
in
yeah.
profits.
Blackstone, yeah.
BlackRock
Yeah,
is
thank you.
Fink. So they're both black. So it shows we're not biased at all. We're not
Yeah.
racist. So anyway, sat down next to him. So I was chatting with him a little bit, and I liked him. So I said, Pete, I like you so much. I'm going to call my driver to bring up a book that I just wrote. And I just written a book called From Hard Knocks to Hot
That's it,
Stocks.
yep.
So
I read it.
called my driver.
Great book.
I called my driver. He brought it up. I gave it to. I inscribed it and I gave it to Pete. So Pete, who'd written a lot of books, and was really very highly regarded guy. He has even the Peterson Foundation still, that does a lot of great work on economics, on politics, and so forth. But anyway, he says to me, Morty, I wrote a book too. So I said, yeah, no, you wrote a lot of books. But he said, the last book I wrote, I sent it to a friend. And he called me back and he said, Pete, I want to tell you something about your book. Once you put it down, you can't pick it up.
That's the first time I heard that one, Morty.
I thought it was brilliant. Not only that, here's a guy that's really at the top of the world,
He's
and he
still
was so humble.
He's still
Most
humble,
you got to feel
Those are
secure
the guys
to
who are
say
real
that
winners,
about
Morty.
your own.
They're comfortable in their own skin, It's great.
But that was so funny. Once you put it down, you can't pick it up. So
So how come
anyway,
your boy Bloomberg didn't win president? That's the thing I don't understand. I thought he was a shoo-in, but he just didn't take
never-
more than 2% of the
I don't know.
voters.
I don't know. I don't know why he didn't run, but you can't win if you don't run. And by the time he entered, it was way
Yeah.
past, after, after the horse had left the
Yeah.
barn. After, what is it
You
called?
said that's right. Yeah.
So anyway, where
Well,
were
you
we
had a
with this
number of
thing? Where was
questions
I?
on that sheet that you sent me that was outlining
Oh, no,
the issue.
I went to
Yeah.
on the book that I'm writing now. I'm discussing defense broadly. First of all, I don't know if you know what the Defense Department was called before it was called the
No
Defense
way.
Department during the Second World War? The War Department. The War Department. The United States figured out that's not a good thing. You don't say, walk up to your friend and you say, I'm sorry your father dropped dead. You say something like, I really feel bad your father passed away, or something, what do they call that? Like a more pleasant way of saying it.
Euphemism.
Yeah, euphemism, a euphemism. Say it in a nice way. So we figured out War Department is not a nice way of saying it because it implies that that it's there to create war. So they called it the Defense Department, but they didn't call it. They didn't break it up into offense department and the defense department because offense is offensive. So it's called the defense department, but we don't say how much we spend offense versus defense.
Yeah.
But why is it defense? What are you going to die from a terrorist attacking the United States? Am I going to die? Are my children going to die?
3,000 of
No.
our brothers died in New York in 9/11, Morty. It happened.
Okay, but
yes.
3,000, no. The odds of you dying at the World Trade Center or anything like that are close to zero.
And it's close to
Percentage
zero
wise.
because we have a missile defense system, a strong military,
No,
and our
it's
enemies know not to attack us.
close to zero because a foreign country can't get their troops in here or their terrorists in here.
Morty,
They
we
can't.
live in a different
But
age. The next war is not going to be done
let
with
me,
troops. It's going to be done with drones,
let me
hypersonic missiles, and
just,
nuclear weapons, Morty.
let me just explain something
Morty,
to
go
you.
ahead.
Even the President Bush, the father,
Right.
lost a child, 5 years old, 4 years old, to cancer. Every congressman, every senator, everybody who's ever served in government, their kids and their grandkids and their great grandkids are going to die from cancer, from heart disease, from diabetes, from Alzheimer's, from all these diseases. More than 3,000, more than 300,000, more than 3 million. So that's the defense we should spend the money on. For cancer, we got to go around with a collection box and beg people to contribute so we could do cancer research. If we spent that kind of money that we spend on defense right now for the things that kill us, in no time at all we'd cure all the diseases.
Morty,
I believe that.
Now we're spending insane amounts of money on climate change, equity, diversity, equity, inclusion, gender, identity. Morty, our kids are graduating school not with basic understanding of math, science, and reading. We have to teach them about transvestites now? Come on, Morty. You can't believe that.
No, I don't. Yeah. But schools aren't teaching that. Only DeSantis makes it a big issue. But anyway,
Morty, I've seen over the shoulders of my children and my friends' children what they're teaching in school when they had COVID. You were actually able to go sit next to your kid and see what the teachers are teaching. The reason why the parents started revolting at school boards is because it's obscene what's going on in the classroom. The teachers' union has gone nuts, and they are not educating, they're indoctrinating our children.
I haven't seen that. DeSantis says that. There hasn't been a big revolution.
I don't care about DeSantis. He wasn't there when I was watching my children online
do
their schoolwork.
It's such a major issue. It's not a major issue. I don't like it. I agree with him that at 3 years old,
we agree not to give sex change to 5-year-olds. Do we agree on that, Morty? Wait till they're an adult to make a decision like that. We agree. We agree?
I don't even, I don't even like the idea of sex change. You're
We're in agreement
biologically
again,
born.
Morty, the third time on this show. We've hit a new world record. Go ahead.
But these are all incidental nothings. But I'm talking about major things. We're spending $750 billion this year on defense. It was only 725. At the last minute, they added another 25 billion. They never defense. You can't vote against it because how could you vote against defense? Moreover, all 50 states, all 50 senators, all 50 congressmen, all 450 congressmen, every one of them gets part of the lucre that the Defense
They
Department
throw
spends.
money in their states. Agree.
Every state,
Agree.
they come back and they say, I just got jobs, and that's outrageous.
It's
We
absolute
should
bribery.
spend it
I agree with you the fourth time,
for
100%. Agree.
research, for doctors, and so forth. But 3,000 people getting killed doesn't entitle you to go to a war against the country. That's our arrogance, and that's because we're spending so much money on defense.
Morty,
And not only that, wait a second, we're the ones that are sponsoring every war in the world because we're selling to both sides of every war. We're the biggest instigators of wars. And since the Second World War, nobody's made more wars than the United States. After the Second World War, we had Korea. We still haven't made peace in Korea. You know that? We have no peace treaty with North Korea.
That's true.
We didn't win that war. Then we had the Vietnam War where we lost, I don't know, a million, the most we ever lost other than the Civil War, Vietnam War. And not only the people that you lose, but only about 4 years ago, the last veteran of the Second World War passed away, and he was at a veteran hospital since 45. So what is that? Like 60, 70, 75 years or something? So the cost of the war doesn't end when we
Win.
get out of the war. In fact, I think Biden is out of his mind for not making it one of the biggest things, best things that he did, and announcing every day that I got the country out of Afghanistan.
It was the worst disastrous pullout in U.S. history. He left $80 billion of our equipment to our mortal enemies, Morty. If you want to, it's a disaster what he did. The worst thing he ever did in his entire 2.5 years. Terrible.
That's the plus. That's a plus for Boeing and Lockheed and Raytheon. That's not important.
17 C-130 aircrafts. You could have gotten all those weapons out. You could have given them to Israel or Ukraine.
But if we left our people there, we'd have more losses and they'd disappear.
We left our people there. Hundreds of Americans were left behind, Morty. They're still there. Hundreds.
We got them all.
Hundreds of. No, we didn't.
Saying that only because 13 people got killed that way. There's a criticism there because it should have been better planned, but that's up to the generals.
We're having independent rescue operations by former Special Forces operators as we speak, going back to Afghanistan, rescuing Americans left behind. In fact, there's a new movie that was just released by Guy Ritchie, one of Madonna's former husbands, on this very subject of American servicemen after the failed pullout by Biden, going back and rescuing their interpreters, family members who are American citizens who also risk their lives to fight alongside us. It's disastrous what Biden's done.
Brett, have you heard of any Americans getting killed since we left Afghanistan?
Yes, several.
No.
Several.
No.
They have been targeting American supporters, sympathizers, allies, and citizens in Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, yes.
Well, maybe, but not Americans.
By the Taliban. Not in America.
He got us
in America.
He got us out of it. He got us out of there. That's, to me, if I was Biden, I would say that's the best thing I did, because every president was saying, we're going to get out, we're going to get out, they never do. So
the way
to me,
Morty was disgraceful. Absolutely.
You got to make
I'm chairman of the Navy SEAL Legacy Foundation. I talk to special operators all the time. They feel that was a betrayal to the blood that was shed by Americans in that country. They think it was an
I know.
absolute betrayal. It was the worst ever operation ever committed under any president, and they feel that not
Guys,
only Biden should be impeached over this, but so should the two leaders,
you
General
know,
Milley and General Austin, should be fired.
those guys that you talk to, all those guys, military guys, those are the betrayals, because we're sending our young people, our most valuable assets, to kill other young people who, if we didn't put them to war, they'd be best friends.
Morty, I
But we
don't disagree with you. We shouldn't have had the war in the first place. I agree on that point.
Right, they're all generals and all. The only way they get promoted, the way they get ahead, is if we expend our military activity. So you're talking to
On
the
the
wrong
general
people
level,
about.
maybe you're right, but I wasn't talking the generals. I was talking the actual special operators, the one who are working on the front line and putting their bodies and their souls in harm's way to defend the country. They are completely disappointed in how this was handled. They think it
The
was
guys that you,
bordering on treason, were the exact words.
I'll enlighten you. The guys you talk to, since the beginning of civilization, of human civilization, kings have sent their young people to war, to get killed, to fight, so they could have all the young girls left behind. And that's the same. All the generals, they send the troops, they're behind, making the plans, telling where to go. They don't lose their lives. How many generals have you seen lose their lives? How many admirals? None of them. They're behind. They send the young people, and they don't even care, because they talk about how many are killed, but for every one that's killed, 10 or 100 are wounded or maimed or crippled. There's no empathy. It's like, why do we do that? Wars should be outlawed. My
The
theory,
only
I should make
problem
a
is you
movie
can't
about.
get the other side to agree to outlawing wars. I mean, if you're attacked, Morty, you have to defend yourself, obviously.
We've not. I just told you we've never been attacked. The United States has never been attacked ever
Do you
since
not
it's
think
the
China is a
last.
likely threat in the future, Morty? Do you not think
The last.
China is a likely threat to attack the United States in the future? Yes or no?
I think. I think the United States is going to inspire them to attack us, because there's no reason why we should be enemies with China. We should work with them every single day. Trump put tariffs on them. They were providing everything. Why do we have inflation? Because Walmart and Target and Home Depot and Lowe's, every product they have there at ridiculously low prices, are only because we get it from China. And that's why we have inflation, because if we make it in America, so he says we got to bring the jobs back to America. We got enough jobs in America for the next 50 years, day and night.
But
For all
not
that we got to
high-paying
do.
manufacturing jobs, Morty. Not everybody wants to work at McDonald's or Burger King.
Let me finish.
Yeah.
The best paying jobs and the best training opportunities and the best apprenticeships for building bridges. Most of the bridges we have in New York were built at least 100 years ago. The tunnel was built 100 years ago.
By Americans, not Chinese.
What do you mean? What do I care? Let them break their ass and give us the things, and we invest in the investments that are long term, that make life better. That we don't sit on the highways and traffic and trucks and traffic. We should have the best. The Chinese are 100 times better than us. They built new highways, they have trains, railroad trains that go 240 miles an hour. We could have that. We could be in Washington in an hour.
I don't think the
on a
Chinese
train.
are better than us, Morty. Not at all. I don't think they're better than us spiritually. I don't think they're better than us intellectually. And I don't think they're better than us in the economy. I think, however, they're much more disciplined because they have a totalitarian regime and they don't allow dissent, and they get more done in a shorter period of time in their government.
All of that's true, but they're also smarter than us because they say they're communists, right?
Yeah.
Communists, Marx would turn over in his grave 440 times because they got more billionaires than the United States.
No, the United States still has more billionaires than China. Forbes came out a couple months ago and confirmed that. The United States has at least 230 more billionaires than China. We have about 760 billionaires. China's in 535, and that includes.
Proportionately,
I read Forbes magazine only a few days ago. That's why I remember.
I'll check it out for you.
Please,
But the United
please.
States, China has more
No,
billionaires
the
than
U.S. still has more
has.
billionaires than China by more than 200 billionaires, and you can look it
Okay,
up in Forbes
say
proportion. Yeah.
say they have less. Say they have only 100.
Okay.
That's outrageous. Marx would turn over in his grave. How do you
Marx
have
would
a
turn over in
billionaire?
his grave. I agree on that subject. Absolutely.
You know, you know what they're smart about? They say, let's look at what countries do the best and imitate what they do. And so
And steal their
they
technology, Morty. You know what happened to my company? I had to chase the Chinese
we're
for 10 years in the courts, okay, when they
making
counterfeited my
we're
technology.
making mistakes on that too, because they create as much good new technology as we do. You know, the leading telecommunication company in the world is a Chinese company. What is it? Wow,
Huawei.
something.
Huawei.
Wow.
And by the way,
It,
most of it's
every,
stolen American patents and stolen American
everyone,
technology.
everyone our allies is using them, even though we tell them not to use them. So the best thing is work with everybody, not be right away. We're going to protect Taiwan. Why are we protecting Taiwan? It was part of China.
You want to know
Why
why we want to protect Taiwan? Is 97% of the world's computer chips are made in Taiwan. And if they take over Taiwan, the Chinese may one day withhold them and shut down all our computer industries and all our telecommunication operations. That is a major threat to the United States.
Let me tell you something. The Chinese are capitalists because they want to sell everything they could to us, the United States. The United States is a great market. That's all bullshit. They say that. And we got to, and in light of that, we do have to, there's certain products we do have to make ourselves. And we've been negligent in letting other people make the critical
so that's
strategic.
an area we agree on. We should bring American manufacturing back to America.
Well, we couldn't go to war over Taiwan because it belongs to China. The end of the Second World War, Chiang Kai-shek was
Deposed.
Not was held in.
And he went to Formosa, the island of Formosa, which became Taiwan.
Yeah,
And he was basically leading. He was against Mao Zedong. He was against Mao Zedong.
What was it?
Who overthrew
Formosa.
and,
What was
and
the other
murdered
one?
tens of millions of people in the process. By the way, Mao Zedong.
Yeah. So it belongs. It's part of China. Why do we? Where do we come off? Well, we should give back. You know what we won in this Mexican-American War? Texas.
Okay.
Our most valuable property we own is Texas, California, Arizona, and New Mexico. We won that in the Mexican-American War.
Mm-hmm.
Why does Mexico get it back?
Never.
Yeah.
So why should China get Taiwan back? Maybe they should get it back. Never.
Countries get it back. I mean, I'm saying if Texas suddenly decided, as they often do, they're going to leave, we wouldn't let them leave. You don't let part of your country leave because one guy wants to have his own country.
I got news for you. I think all the red states want to leave and let California, New York, and Illinois fend for themselves. Those are the three states that create the most deficits and the most insanity, the most crime. You know, as far as I'm concerned, California can leave anytime it wants. New York can leave, and so can Illinois.
I wish they'd do that because the red states would suck kind breasts. You know, California produces most of our food in this country, most of it. And California is so productive, and New York is so productive. The red states produce nothing.
Deficits of the United States. And by the way, people are voting with their feet, Morty. More people are leaving California to move to Texas than people going from Texas to California. In fact, it costs you 3 times more to take a ride or rent a truck from Texas to California than California to Texas. It's insane. It's insane. Nobody wants to move to California. They're all moving out. People are voting with their feet, Morty. And by the way, in my neighborhood in Florida, in Vizcaya, we got more people with New York accents in my neighborhood than anything else. It used to be you'd wait a week to hear somebody with a New York accent. The cars, the license plates with New York on it in Florida is unbelievable. Almost every other car I see now are people moving in from New York. So people obviously made a decision as to which state they want to live in. and they're in droves. Thousands of people a day are moving from New York to
That's
Florida,
because
California to Texas.
that's because New York supports the rest of the country, the red states. We pay much more taxes than we get back
New York is the worst
government.
run state in the union, and so is California. Gavin Newsom is a complete clown, and so is Hochul, the governor of New York. The crime wave that's going on in New York City is shameful, Morty. You wouldn't want your family, your daughters, God forbid, to be robbed or mugged or raped by these felons that the DA Alvin Bragg's running in the streets.
Why do you believe that? It's never been better. New York has never
Are you
been
kidding?
lower.
Morty, please.
I'll send you.
How often
Send
do
you
you
the
leave the
statistics.
house and go to New York City, Morty?
I walk through Harlem. I never worried
Well,
about
Harlem's become much nicer now. I was at 130 at the
it. I'm
Lennox
not,
Lounge and
I'm not
130
talking
at
about
Lennox. It's beautiful there now.
now. I'm talking about 50 years ago.
Right.
I never worried about it, but maybe that was stupid. But
No, you weren't
New
stupid.
York,
You weren't stupid. I went up there when I was a
huh?
kid. I went to the Cotton Club. I went to the Lennox Lounge with my buddies on my wrestling team. I had a great time there, and nobody bothered me. I was probably the only white guy in the room at the time, but they were very nice to me. And by the way, the food was amazing. So I was happy to go up there. I don't think you were crazy.
But I'll get you the statistics. New
Please.
York has never been, and it's been going down, the crime rate.
You think the crime
Chicago,
rate has gone down?
yes.
That's not what
I'll
the
send it to you.
statistics are showing. And
I'll send you
even
the
the mayor
statistics.
of New York is claiming that the DAs, the liberal DAs, shouldn't be letting people on the streets. They're recommitting crimes like crazy.
I wouldn't lose.
Your
I
Mayor
wouldn't
Adams
live.
was on TV on a news
I
show
would.
saying that he
I
thinks
would not.
crime's got to stop.
I don't want to disabuse you, but I would never choose to live anywhere else but New York, or the other thing. When I
It's certainly
graduated
your
Harvard,
choice, Morty. I respect you for that.
I love Boston, and that's another state that I would live in.
Yeah.
But other than that, I wouldn't live in Florida. My son-in-law moved to Florida because of taxes,
Right.
and that's wrong, but he has a right to do what he wants to do. People move to
Morty,
Texas.
you're always welcome in Colorado. We've got 5 guest rooms facing the mountains. I'd love to have you.
Colorado.
You're always welcome.
Colorado happens to be a reasonable state. Colorado is not the red state.
It's a purple state. It's somewhere in between.
That's what I mean, Anyway, have we discussed anything about Trump and
Lead the way, Morty. You lead.
I gotta have you, because we didn't cover it. Let's see what I had
You
here.
lead, Morty. You got the script.
No, you're great. I love listening to you. With President Biden announcing this week his intention to seek re-election, the different possible future directions of the country are becoming more clearly defined by the candidates entering the presidential race. With a Biden-Trump rematch entirely possible in 2024, we need to question how each candidate's policies and priorities would affect the country, and given their differences, which should we choose? Then the other thing is domestic versus foreign. Should the U.S. be the world's policeman, or should we be more the term you just used, isolationist, regarding
We covered that.
keeping
Yeah.
keeping head actors in check like Putin? Is it true that all that is required for the triumph of evil, for evil to triumph, is for good men to do nothing? Are we those good men? You are, but not me. You're one of the good men.
You're a good man, Morty. You've always been a good man.
Of the people, how do we better reflect the will of the people versus the will of politicians in the way our country is governed? For example, most Americans support gun control and the right to an abortion, yet our laws and policies do not always, never reflect this. Should they? Domestic spending, should we reduce defense spending? If so, should we spend that reduction on other programs, or just reduce the deficit? Should social safety net programs like the Earned Income Tax Credit be increased? Should the government fund college or vocational training for every citizen? regulation. How do you regulate businesses to prevent price gouging without discouraging expensive R&D necessary for the innovation and discovery of new drugs and therapies? Personal freedom. When are mandates appropriate? Is a COVID vaccine mandate different from the mandate for a draft into the armed services? Those are subjects we didn't cover, and those are very relevant,
Yes. Well, you
that
did touch
people
on a
won't even,
number of them. We talked about the Monroe Doctrine you brought up and isolationism. We talked about our feelings between Trump and Biden. We didn't agree, but we spoke about them. But the other points, you're right. I think you and Leonard did a great job lining them up. Tell me which ones you feel we haven't touched.
we don't have a democracy, because in a democracy, the voters, the majority of the voters, elect the people, the legislatures,
Right.
and supposedly they're legislatures. They're governing their president, their senate, their congressmen, their local and they don't adhere to that. Who do they adhere to? The guys the donors.
Yep.
So that's why it's not.
And the
That's not a
lobbyists,
democracy.
Morty, the lobbyists.
That's what the donors are, the lobbyists.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. I agree.
That's why
We agree.
that's why the gun lobby is more strong than any other lobby, because other lobbies or other people vote on a lot of things, but they are targeted like.
They're in their offices every day, Morty. The lobbyists are in their offices every day. Their constituents they see maybe once a month. Yeah.
The
Right.
NRA is targeted against, even the Democrats that are for gun control would not dare vote against the NRA, because they know they'll be primaried and be supported up the kazoo. Their opponent would be.
Well, it's
So
also true with the pharmaceutical lobbyists, which I think are the biggest lobbyists, even bigger than NRA.
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
obscene what the cost of drugs are in the United States. So that's a point you brought up when you were reading about the people not being in charge. Morty, you can go to Canada and buy almost every medicine you buy in the United States for 1/10 the price. Okay? And even though I'm a conservative and I'm a Republican, I loved Michael Moore's movie. You know Michael Moore? He's a left-wing Democrat who did a lot of movies. A brilliant movie where he went to Cuba, Michael Moore, with a group of elderly and infirmed citizens, American citizens. And when they saw what the prices were for the same drugs in Cuba that they were paying for the United States, they started crying. They realized how much they were being taken advantage of. So this is an important point where we agree on, and I'm with you 100%, Morty.
Are you aware that the Republicans said they would buy Michael Moore an estate in Cuba and support him for the rest of his life in like a multi-millionaire if he would stay there?
Yeah.
But are you aware? I don't know if you're aware. You probably are. You're aware of everything.
No, not everything, but go ahead. Tell me.
That the two industries that can't be sued, and the drug industry for pricing,
and the gun industry,
and not only that, but they can't. Medicare, which is the biggest purchaser of drugs, can't use that power to negotiate lower prices.
You are 100% right. It's crazy.
So what does that say? So are they screwing billions of people in this country?
Yep.
What do we have? 3.25 billion people.
No, million. 3.25 million people. We have about 365 million people in the country.
I'm sorry, 325 million.
No, we have 365 million now.
365 million. I was screwing 365 million, or maybe there's a few not screwed. 365 million, or just to help the pharmaceutical industry.
Right.
So they said pharmaceutical industry, well, you got to let them make a lot of money because they create all the new drugs. The NIH it starts off most of the drugs and gives them tons of funds and so forth. The gun industry, you can't sue the manufacturer, you can't sue the wholesaler, you can't sue the retailer. if one of them arranges for a criminal with a long record, with murder, with everything, they can't sue them if they find out that they negligently sold a gun to.
No,
So who are we protecting?
Morty, I
Who do
agree
you?
with you on those points. Those are factual. But
How is this a democracy?
no, it's not. It's two
Oh,
things. I mean, we're not quite yet a kleptocracy, although I think we're getting there. But I definitely feel that
democracy.
that it's unfair to the average citizen when the donor
I think,
class and the lobbyists have more power than the American voters. I think it's unfair. I agree with you.
Brett, I think it's a plutocracy when the rich run the country. The donors run the country.
Right.
I don't think what is a kleptocracy?
Well, I think if you watch what Hunter Biden's been doing lately, it's a kleptocracy. That guy's getting tens of millions of dollars from Ukraine, from China. They've already proven through the bank account transfers that they've published that he's been transferring it to all his family members. That's a kleptocracy when you're in a position where you're basically throwing influence. It's disgraceful.
We don't know that yet. It's like the claims
We
that
have the bank statements. We know it
like
now.
claims that,
And by the
it's
way,
like
we
the
have his
claim-
laptop. He admits it's his laptop because he's suing over
like the
his laptop.
claims. It's like the claims that Rudy Giuliani, who used to be a great friend of mine,
Right.
Rudy Giuliani, I was a big supporter of his.
Yeah.
And then what's her name? Sidney Powell.
Yep.
The proof they had that the Biden election was rigged. They went to 61 courts, many of the judges appointed by Trump, and I think there was one case that took one court that took it up seriously and found nothing. So, but they still maintain that they say it's there, and I'm glad to see that the Dominion just won that case.
Well, they didn't win the case.
I mean,
They're settling it. They're settling it.
Well,
Yeah. Right.
but I mean, when you pay
They settled in their
870,
favor. Yeah. I think Fox
But
should have
what-
fought that case. Honestly,
what
I think they should have fought.
that it would have been a total loser.
And even Kennedy, who's running for president right now, thinks that Tucker Carlson shouldn't have been fired over this. Interesting. And a
Well,
Democrat.
It doesn't matter. I'm not saying Democrats don't make mistakes. I'm not saying Republicans are wrong. You know,
Yeah.
I voted Republicans many times. I was very active in Republican
I
Party.
remember. Yeah.
As a matter of fact, the founder of what's his name, Fox News.
Rupert Murdoch.
He wasn't the founder. Roger Ailes.
Yeah. Okay.
Was an active Republican, a very good friend of mine.
Mhm.
As a matter of fact, when he got thrown out of Fox because he carried on some way,
Yeah.
I dropped a note and said, you know, to me, the people that love you still love you, believe you're great,
Nice of you.
and the people doesn't matter. And then he died a few years later. I wish I could find a letter. His wife, and I don't even know how to reach his wife. His wife sent me such a beautiful letter. I never got such a beautiful letter. She says, Morty, your letter to
Roger.
was so encouraging and so upbeat. The last few years of his life, he kept reading that letter.
No, you've always been a good friend, Marty, and you've always been inspiring. And it's one of the things I loved about you. And I still do.
You'll get it. Brett, you'll get over it.
Marty,
I love you.
I may be crazy, but I still love you.
I love you. I love your wisdom. I love your energy. I love your ideologies. Often, I don't agree with them all the time, but I like somebody that believes in things, you know. And if you hang out with generals and admirals and guys that send troops to the front and love wars, then you're going to be, influenced by that group.
Morty, my dad served in World War II. My stepfather, Michael Block, was a World War II B-17 bomber pilot. He was wounded twice. So is my father. All I can tell you is Nobody in the military who's actually served a time of war loves war. I don't love war. My dad didn't love war. My grandfather, who served in World War I under General Blackjack Pershing, he didn't love war. Okay, he left with both a lot of wounds, both
Why do you encourage all this defense spending? It's not defense
because I
spending.
want to avoid war. I want to be prepared, keep the peace.
North Korea, Vietnam, or what were the other ones? Iran, Iraq,
Afghanistan.
Afghanistan, and now we're involved in Ukraine.
Look, we also invaded Panama. Remember, we invaded Panama. We invaded a lot of South American countries too.
We invaded.
We still have the dictator of Panama in an American jail, by the way.
We invaded Grenada. We bombed Grenada.
Correct.
Has no army even. We bombed a lunatic asylum there.
Right.
You know what Grenada has? A medical school that all the kids that want to be doctors can't get into medical school.
So
and
they apply to that school to get their degree.
That's one of the most profitable businesses. It is the most profitable business on the island. One of my friends is on the board of directors. He says they make so much money. But, but Reagan was a genius because he said we had all these wars since the end of the Second World War. Korean War, again, Vietnam War, Afghanistan War, Iraq War, now maybe Ukraine War. We had all these wars and we hadn't won one. We left with our tail and a lot of dead soldiers.
Yeah, but listen, we freed the world when we won World War II, Morty. That was important.
That's it. That's where we should have stopped. But we gave so much blood and treasure to these efforts. And the genius of
Reagan.
Ronald Reagan, the cowboy. The genius, as he knew we needed a win. So he bombed Grenada. And Jackie Mason used to say, I am so happy that what Ronald Reagan did, because now I don't go to sleep anymore at night worrying that Grenada is going to do a surprise attack on New York. I mean, that's
sounds like
while
Jackie
I'm
Mason.
sleeping.
Yeah.
But, the great thing about what's his name, and every president should learn that, is what Ronald Reagan was always upbeat, always, and whatever he did, whether he did it or not, they always attribute. They say he balanced the budget or that he reduced the deficit. He increased the deficit dramatically, but he's so loved, and they attribute anything good to him. But that's what you got to do. What did he say on the hill? The
Rising.
The what?
Shining city on a hill. The shining city on the hill. America needs to remain the shining city on the hill. Yes.
The shining city on the hill. The shining
Reagan was one of our greatest presidents. I agree with you again. And Morty, I think this is a world record for the dozen or so podcasts we've had. We've never agreed more.
Right. If you keep agreeing so much, I'm not going to invite you back.
I knew you were going to say that.
I love you. Have a great week, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the program. I really enjoy Brett Kingstone. He's really a king. I don't know what the stone come from. Brett, joining me. I always look forward to inviting him back because he's the best. And you are the best. I wish you all a great week, a great day. Every day should be better than the prior day all the rest of your life. God bless you. I love you. Bye.